I was 19 years old when this happened, during a road trip with my best friend Jake. We were driving across the country for the summer, just two stupid kids with barely enough money to get by, staying at the cheapest motels we could find along the way. We'd been on the road for about 2 weeks when we pulled into this dingy motel in the middle of nowhere, somewhere between Arizona and New Mexico. The place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 1970s, faded red paint peeling off the walls, flickering neon signs, and a parking lot with maybe 3 other cars in it. The guy at the front desk barely looked at us as he handed over a key to room 247. Jake was exhausted from driving all day, so he crashed as soon as we got inside. I was too wired, too amped from the road, so I decided to take a shower and maybe walk around a bit. After my shower, I felt this weird compulsion to explore the room more thoroughly. I don't even know why. Maybe it was just the paranoia of staying in a place like this. I started opening drawers in the nightstand, checking under the bed, looking in the closet, just the usual checking for creepy stuff routine that you do in sketchy hotels. That's when I noticed something odd about the closet. There was a small gap at the back wall, like the paneling didn't quite fit right. I pushed on it, and it gave way, revealing a hidden compartment. My heart started racing because I had no idea what I was about to find. I reached in and pulled out a manila folder thick with papers. Inside were photographs, not just any photographs, but photos of women. Dozens of them, some sleeping, some in bathrooms, some changing clothes. These were surveillance photos taken without consent, and my stomach absolutely dropped. There were names written on the back of each photo with dates and room numbers. I felt physically ill, like I was going to throw up right there in that closet. My hand was shaking as I dug deeper into the folder and found handwritten notes describing each woman, where they worked, what time they got home, their routines. This wasn't just some creepy voyeurism collection. This was a stalking operation. This was someone planning something. I immediately woke Jake up and showed him what I'd found. His face went completely pale. We knew we had to call the police, but we were also terrified. What if the person who owned this stuff came back to the room? What if they were watching us right now? We locked ourselves in the bathroom and called 911 from there. The police arrived within 20 minutes, and they took the evidence seriously immediately. They told us not to leave the room and to keep the door locked. Officers started going through the motel systematically, checking rooms, looking for the person responsible. Jake and I sat on the bathroom floor for what felt like hours, listening to the sounds of police activity outside our door. Eventually, one of the officers came and told us they'd found the person, the night manager. He'd been using his access to hotel rooms to photograph and stalk female guests. They'd arrested him that night, and we later found out he'd been doing this for over 5 years at that location alone. He targeted hundreds of women. The thought that we could have been murdered or robbed that night, or that we'd stumbled onto the operation of a serial predator, completely haunted me for months afterward. I still remember lying in that motel bed after the police left, unable to sleep, staring at the closet door, and thinking about all those women in those photos, how violated they must have felt if they ever found out. Jake and I cut the road trip short and drove home the next day. We didn't talk much during that drive. I still have nightmares about what could have happened if we hadn't been curious enough to open that closet, or worse, what could have happened to us if we'd left those photos there and that guy had discovered we'd found them. This happened about 3 years ago when I was 21, and it's something I've replayed in my head countless times, analyzing every decision I made that night. My friends and I decided to go camping at a lake about 2 hours from the city. There were 5 of us, me, my girlfriend Sarah, my buddy Marcus, and 2 other friends, David and Jennifer. We drove out on a Friday afternoon, set up camp near the water, made a fire, and everything seemed perfect. The weather was great, we had plenty of food and drinks, and we were all just looking forward to a relaxing weekend away from everything. That night, we sat around the fire drinking and talking until pretty late, maybe around midnight. Sarah had gone to bed earlier because she wasn't feeling great, said she had a headache, so she was in her tent. Marcus and David were getting pretty drunk, being loud and obnoxious in that way drunk guys get, while Jennifer and I was hanging back, enjoying the vibe. Around 1 a.m., we decided to call a night. I walked Jennifer back to her tent, made sure she got an okay, and then headed back to my tent where Sarah was supposedly sleeping. When I got there, I found Sarah sitting up, looking genuinely concerned. She told me she'd heard someone walking around our tent about 20 minutes ago. At first, I thought maybe it was one of the guys stumbling around drunk, but Sarah said it didn't sound right. She said whoever it was had walked slowly around the tent, and she could hear them breathing heavily, almost like they were trying to be quiet but couldn't help making some noise. My first instinct was to brush it off, but Sarah was genuinely scared, and that made me take it seriously. I told her to lock herself in the tent, and I went back out to the fire. Marcus and David were passed out in their chairs, empty beer cans scattered around. This unsettled me, because if they were asleep, they couldn't have been the person walking around her tent. I want to wake them up and ask them what was going on, but before I could even get there, I heard something that made my blood run cold. It was a sound from the direction of Jennifer's tent, a sudden, startled yelp, like she'd been scared by something. I immediately ran over to her tent and found her sitting up, eyes wide, looking absolutely terrified. She said someone had grabbed the outside of her tent, like they were trying to get in. She'd screamed, which is what we'd heard. I felt this surge of adrenaline and fear all at once. There was someone in our campsite, someone who wasn't part of our group, and they were moving from tent to tent. I went back and woke up Marcus and David, who were finally getting sober real quick, and told them what was happening. We decided to stick together and search the campsite. We grabbed flashlights and walked the perimeter, shining lights into the darkness, calling out, trying to figure out who was there. For a few minutes, we didn't find anything, and I started wondering if maybe we were overreacting, if Sarah or Jennifer had imagined it or gotten spooked by an animal. Then Marcus's flashlight caught something. A figure, maybe 30 feet away from us, standing completely still in the darkness between the trees. It was a man just standing there watching us, and when the light hit him, he didn't run or react. He just stood there staring at us. I felt my entire body go cold. There was something deeply wrong about the way he was just standing there, the way he was watching us. Marcus yelled at him, asking what he wanted, but the man didn't say anything. He just started walking toward us, slowly and deliberately. That's when we all basically panicked. We ran back toward the fire, grabbed whatever we could use as weapons, tent stakes, a shovel, anything, and I told everyone to get to the cars. The man continued walking toward us, not running, just walking with this eerie calm, and that's what terrified me the most. It wasn't like he was panicked or desperate. He was controlled, purposeful. We made it to the cars and locked ourselves in, and I called 911. The operator asked me to describe the man, and I realized I could barely tell them anything concrete. He was wearing dark clothes. That was all I could really say. The police said they were on their way, but would take at least 30 minutes to get there. We sat in those cars for what felt like an eternity, watching the darkness beyond our headlights, half expecting the man to appear at any moment. At one point, we saw him again, standing at the edge of the light from our car's headlights, still just watching us. When the police finally arrived, we pointed them in the direction we'd last seen him, but they searched the entire area and couldn't find anyone. They theorized he could have fled into the woods, gotten in a vehicle parked somewhere else, or any number of things. What freaked me out the most was that the police officer told us this area had had a history of incidents. There had been a few break-ins at campsites in the area over the past couple of years, and there was a wanted person who'd been spotted in the region. We didn't sleep that night. We packed up camp immediately and drove home, all 5 of us squeezed into 2 cars, staying alert the entire way. I still don't know who that man was or what he wanted from us, but I know he was looking for something or someone. The randomness of it, the fact that we could have been in real danger and never even know why, haunted me for a long time. I haven't been camping since. I was 16 when I lived in this quiet suburban neighborhood with my family. Everything about it seemed safe and normal. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, kids playing in yards. We had this one neighbor, Mr. Kessler, who lived 2 houses down from us. He was an older man, maybe in his 60s, who kept to himself mostly. He had a big house with a detached garage and a basement. I'd see him occasionally working on cars or projects in his driveway, and he'd always wave politely. Nobody thought anything was unusual about him. One afternoon, I was walking through the neighborhood with my friend Tyler, and we decided to cut through Mr. Kessler's yard to get to the park faster. It wasn't something we usually did, but the direct route was taking too long. As we were walking across his property, Tyler jokingly said, "I bet he's got some creepy serial killer stuff in that basement," and we both laughed. But then something caught my eye. The basement window was open, and I could see light on down there. More specifically, I could see what looked like a workbench with tools, and behind it, on the wall, there were photographs. Dozens of them, covering the entire wall. From where I was standing, I couldn't see the details, but something about the arrangement struck me as odd. I told Tyler to wait a second, and I walked closer to the window, just to get a better look. What I saw made my stomach drop. Those photographs were of people. Specifically, they were of women and girls. Some of them I recognized from the neighborhood. There was Mrs. Chun from across the street. There was Sarah, a girl from my school. There was even a picture of my older sister getting out of her car in our driveway. The photos weren't just random pictures either. They looked like surveillance photos, taken from a distance, shot through windows or from hidden angles. I felt this wave of nausea wash over me, and I immediately grabbed Tyler and told him we needed to leave right then without explanation. He could tell something was wrong and didn't ask questions. We walked quickly away from that house, and once we were far enough, I told him what I'd seen. Tyler didn't believe me at first. He thought I was making it up, or that I'd misunderstood what I was looking at. But I was certain. I knew what I'd seen, and I knew it wasn't normal. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to tell my parents, but another part of me worried that maybe I'd gotten it wrong, that maybe there was some innocent explanation. But there was no innocent explanation for surveillance photos of my sister and other women in the neighborhood. That night, I told my mom. She went pale when I described what I'd seen, and she immediately called the police. I had to give them a detailed description of everything I'd seen, and they took it seriously right away. The next day, the police showed up at Mr. Kessler's house with a warrant. I watched from my bedroom window as they went inside. What happened next was a blur of police activity, forensic teams, and what felt like the entire neighborhood standing outside watching. They were in that house for hours. We later found out that Mr. Kessler's basement was basically a surveillance operation. He had hundreds of photographs of women in the neighborhood, detailed notes about their routines and schedules, and he'd been systematically following and documenting them for years. He had cameras hidden in places all over the neighborhood. The scariest part was what the police told my mom in private. They said that based on the evidence they found, Mr. Kessler had been escalating. He wasn't just photographing and watching anymore. He had been planning something. He had written notes about specific women and what he wanted to do to them, and my sister's name was at the top of that list. If we hadn't cut through his yard that day, if I hadn't looked through that window, my sister could have become a victim. Mr. Kessler was arrested and convicted, and he's in prison now. But for years after, I couldn't walk through that neighborhood without feeling this crushing sense of dread. The man who waved at me politely, who I'd seen countless times, was a predator living right next to us. And the scariest part was that he looked completely normal. There was nothing about him that screamed danger or evil. He was just this ordinary old man with a comfortable house, and nobody would have ever suspected what was happening in that basement if I hadn't happened to look through that window at exactly the right moment. I was 23 years old when I started working as a nurse's aide at a hospital in a medium-sized city. The job paid decently, and I was working my way through my prerequisites for nursing school, so it seemed like the perfect fit. I was usually assigned to the night shift, which I didn't mind. The hospital was quieter at night, fewer visitors, and it gave me time to focus on my work. I've been working there for about 4 months when things started to feel off. It began with small things, items going missing from the supply closet, passwords not working that should have, and a general sense that someone was moving around in parts of the hospital after hours that shouldn't have had activity. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid or that I was misremembering things, but then other staff members started mentioning the same oddities. One night, around 3 a.m., I was restocking supplies on the 3rd floor when I noticed the door to the secured medical records room was slightly ajar. It should have been locked, and the only people with access were senior staff. I went to close it, but I stopped when I heard sound coming from inside, footsteps, and then the sound of files being moved around. My heart started racing because I knew immediately that something was very wrong. I quietly backed away from the door and called security on the hospital phone. I told them I suspected someone was in the medical records room, and they said they'd send someone immediately. I stood near the room, but didn't approach it, and after about a minute, I heard the footsteps inside stop abruptly, like whoever had realized they'd been discovered. There was a long silence, and then the door swung open from the inside. A man in a hospital employee uniform came out, someone I didn't recognize. He looked startled when he saw me, and for a second, we just stared at each other. His eyes were cold, assessing, like he was calculating something. He said in this casual voice, "Oh, I was just looking for something, thought I left my badge in here," but everything about his demeanor screamed that he was lying. I told him that security was on their way, and his expression changed. He turned and started walking quickly down the hallway toward the stairwell. I didn't follow him. I'd watched enough crime shows to know that was a stupid idea. Security arrived within minutes, and they found him trying to leave through the emergency stairwell on the 1st floor. They detained him, and the police arrived shortly after. What we found out was absolutely terrifying. This man was not actually an employee of the hospital. He'd stolen credentials and access badges from a real employee, and he'd been coming to the hospital multiple times over the past week, using the access to pull patient records. But it wasn't random patients he was looking for. He was specifically looking for records of women he'd been stalking. He had their names, their addresses, their medical information, everything he needed to continue tracking them. The police found notebooks in his car documenting women he'd been following, including photographs, license plate numbers, work addresses, and deeply disturbing notes about his intentions. Some of these women had filed restraining orders against him months before. He was a serial stalker who was using the hospital's system to track down his victims. I remember sitting in the hospital break room while this was all happening, shaking uncontrollably, thinking about how close this man had gotten to pulling off something unspeakable. The police said that if he'd managed to complete his access to the records and get away undetected, he likely would have escalated his behavior against his victims. He was arrested and charged with burglary, identity theft, and stalking. But what kept me up for weeks afterward was the memory of his eyes when he saw me, that cold, calculating look that made me realize he was the kind of person who could hurt someone without hesitation. I'd walked that hallway 100 times before and never felt unsafe. Now I couldn't look at certain parts of the hospital without remembering that moment, without feeling that chill run down my spine. I transferred to the day shift not long after that, and eventually I left the hospital entirely. I couldn't shake the feeling that the night shift had exposed me to a darker side of people that I wasn't ready to handle. That experience changed how I saw the world, made me realize that predators don't always look like predators, and sometimes the scariest moments come when you're just doing your job, working nights, thinking you're in a safe place.